Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Crista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. Today, I am so excited because Jordan Eades is back. So for those of you who remember back to episode 19, Jordan was on with me and we were talking about the dark side of success in business and burnout. And it was a really excellent episode. So if you have not listened to it, go back and check it out. But today, we're going to do a deep dive into overworking, which we know is something that can lead to burnout. So we're going to go deep on this. And Jordan is the expert and cannot wait to hear all of her wisdom in today's episode. So before we dive in, though, and I give Jordan the floor, let me tell you a little bit about her. So Jordan Eades is a holistic business coach and founder of Your Best Business Life. She's a serial entrepreneur who ran and sold a highly successful 8-figure general contracting company. And she did all this before she very bravely pivoted, and her business had kind of gotten to the point where it was taking over her life and everything personal felt like it was crashing and burning. So she did something many of us would not have been brave enough to do, and she sold that business and ended up going on an epic 2-year RV adventure around the US, seeing more than 40 states. And in that journey, that's really where she discovered the keys for sustainable success and really creating a life that fuels your business. And today she takes that and helps female business owners break through the ugly cycle of overworking and burnout and really create sustainable and profitable businesses to invest in their self-care without feeling guilty and to bring joy and pleasure back into their lives. So, Jordan, I'm so excited that you're back. Welcome back to the show.
Yay. Thank you, Crista. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So here's what I want to dive into is I think we all know generally what overworking is, but can you walk us through so we have that kind of common understanding? How do you define overworking? And then can you share a little bit about why you think it's so important that we be talking about this and address this in business?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, we've heard the term overworking, and simply put, it's just working too hard, too much, too long, and not providing the body and mind ample time for rest and relaxation, right? That's critical to our success. And overworking is a precursor to burnout. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And burnout's a really hot topic these days, and it's with good reason, right? We see about 55% of small business owners who are reporting, higher levels of stress, worry, physical symptoms, and this is happening on a daily basis. And when you go out and you start looking at the information, we're seeing really vague descriptions of burnout. And I would say general surface advice. So I'm sure you've heard this too, like you should meditate, do some yoga, restructure your calendar, take time off. But what we need is a much deeper dive into the reasons why we're overworking. And right? So this is what I needed to know for myself. And it's important to know that burnout doesn't happen overnight. It is a chronic state of emotional, physical, mental exhaustion caused by that prolonged and excessive stress. This is the chronic state of fight or flight. And what is the good news is that there are several phases, one of them being overworking, that happen before we reach burnout. And what is good about this is that overworking is much easier to course correct and heal. When you reach that stage of true burnout, which is HPA axis dysfunction, adrenal fatigue, autoimmune illnesses, basically, what we've said before is like, game over. we have some opportunities. We don't want to get ourselves into that state of burnout, because then healing becomes our primary job, right? Not working, not our businesses. And it's 24/7. And of course, from talking before, you know that this was my experience. I landed myself squarely in burnout, and it took me, several years to be able to come back to work. And even still today, I'm in my healing process. So to prevent burnout, it's critical that we can identify the where, the when, and the why that we're overworking. Awareness is that first step. Then we can begin the process of healing and really it's our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you said there that I think a lot of people miss is they think of burnout, and I always say there's like little b burnout and there's big B burnout. And
Yes.
the little b burnout is the signs that you're burning out, like you're really exhausted, you're foggy, you're not able to focus, you don't love what you do anymore. There's like a lot of those little things, but when you get to big B burnout, it's no joke.
Oh,
And it is a long term impact, which I know you talked about on the last episode, but can you share a little more about that too?
for sure. So when I fully arrived in, big B burnout, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't think. I couldn't remember words. I had, a collection of really, I would say, bizarre symptoms. I had trouble walking. I couldn't drive. So there's no way I could show up for my business because I had a hard time even showing, up for myself and being able to like actually function in my daily life. I had what they refer to as severe adrenal fatigue, and also I developed an autoimmune condition, chronic Epstein-Barr, which is chronic mono. And for anybody who's ever experienced that, there's like you are down for the count. It feels awful. You're sick all the time, sore throats and all the like. So 100%, we don't want to go there. And the good news is that if we catch overworking soon enough, we don't have to go there. We don't have to land in burnout.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is such an important conversation. And I'm so happy that you're here and talking about this and getting to the true underlying cause of it. Because I think burnout almost gets romanticized a little bit. People look at it almost like a rite of passage,
Oh,
like, oh,
yes.
I'm burning out while I'm building my business.
Yeah.
And it's no joke, guys. Like, this is
No.
not something that you want to have happen. And most importantly, it's completely avoidable. So, can you help us understand what it actually looks like and feels like to be overworking?
Sure, absolutely. When I think when we envision that, like, what is what is that person doing? What does it look like? For many of my clients, I say it just looks like the business has taken over. Everything is prioritized around the business instead of life. So that person is being pulled away from wellness activities, joy, connection. It's where your girlfriend says, "Hey, come do this, yoga class, or come to this book club," and you're saying, "No, no, 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 I don't even have time for that. I've got all these business things that need to happen." It also looks like difficulty relaxing, right? You're chronically in that state about thinking about work. We can't put it down. We can't take a break. Always feeling that there's not enough hours in the day. And the to-do list that you have just keeps growing, right? It's not a list anymore. It's like a novel of things. Like, I've got to do this and this, this. Feeling like you're never going to catch up. And again, and what I was talking about is that your health is visibly deteriorating. You're not able to sleep. You don't feel well. You're getting sick all the time. So, yeah, and so that's what it looks like. And it feels like, and I think you've talked about this before as well, you're on that hustle hamster wheel and you can't catch your breath. I remember literally feeling out like breathless all the time. Like, I just couldn't catch up. And it's that sensation of I'm, both totally exhausted, but, also really anxious. So wired and tired is a feeling that would describe, those when you're in that pattern of overworking. your patience is thin, you're stressed. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that you've heard the stories as well. You can relate.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
I have definitely been there. I am a recovering overworker, so
I know.
all of
I
this is
noticed,
like check, check, check.
right? I noticed you were kind of like smiling and nodding your head, and it's really, really common. And we're going to talk a little bit about, just society later on, societally, how it really does become kind of a badge of honor. We somehow think, oh, I'm supposed to feel this way. Like we have normalized it. But unfortunately, we don't want to normalize behaviors that are leading to burnout and putting us in places that are going to really chronically affect our health and our well-being.
Yeah, I would say when this was probably at its worst for me, which I've talked about some of the major lessons I learned back in my first business. But when it was at its worst, what I remember is it did not matter how much I did. I always had this like crushing feeling of that I should be doing more. Like I didn't
Yes.
want to take a break or step away from the business or even eat lunch sometimes because I'm like, I should be doing this. I need to be doing this. If I'm not doing this, and it was self-imposed pressure, but I
Yes.
just, it felt like crushingly like I should always be doing something more, and what I was doing was never enough, even
Right.
though I was working practically around the clock. And it's I feel like that's, for me anyway, part of it as well.
100%. And you bring up a really important point, which is the background noise of like guilt and shame that's preventing us from practicing consistent self-care, right? Preventing us from stepping away. We're prioritizing everything else. And I had a good friend who, because I was in that mindset as well, and she stopped me one day and she said, Jordan, you don't feel guilt or shame for maintaining your car, maintaining your home. You think of those activities as a necessity, right? Maintenance is essential if you want your car to run or your home to function and have value. And she said, like, it's the same with your self-care and your health. And it was like light bulb moment, bing. So after that, my thoughts changed from I'm neglecting my clients or employees when I take my daily walk or do my self-care activities to when I schedule and commit to my self-care activities, I'm better able to serve my clients. I'm better able to provide leadership for my employees, right? Your best self does your best work. So
I love it. Yeah, it's so incredibly true, and I love that analogy. What a good thing to have shared with you.
yeah, right. She was pretty sage, pretty wise.
So let's dive into why we overwork. What are some of the
Okay,
main reasons why we end up in a place where we feel like we need to, or where we build a habit of overworking?
right. So I identified two major areas for myself. And then when I started working with clients, that pattern was repeated. So we see both external factors, and what I would say is these are factors that are breakdowns in your business foundation: lack of planning, lack of strategy, lack of systems. We are overworking, so we're working harder, we're looking longer, we're working more than we need to because we don't have these key elements in place in our business that free up our time and inform our decision making. And what are these things? Well, it's a business plan, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be, a business plan canvas, but we need to have one. We need to do our strategic planning. We need to have marketing plans and strategy. Otherwise, you're just going to habitually be in that place where you're guessing, you're starting from scratch all the time, you're doing things over and over again, and it's wasted time and energy. And I know with Lean Out Method that you can speak directly to this, right? That's why I love Lean Out Method so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, people work so much harder than they need to. And as people look at growing their business, as they look at scaling their business, as they kind of go through those different stages of the entrepreneurial journey, they frequently make things so much harder on themselves than they need to because they don't
Yeah.
put, like you said, the strategic planning and the systems in the team and the things in place that are actually going to create that ecosystem for success. And most importantly, the ecosystem for success that does not require overworking.
Exactly. And have loved how you've said you need to be working on the right activities at the right time. The needle movers, the things that have the maximum impact on our bottom line. And we're not used to working in that way. These are habits and skill sets that we have to develop over time. I would also say that's really, really important, and I know that you talk about this, that you're working from a place that's connected to your vision, right? That you're thinking about of what type of impact that you want to have and what you want your life to look and feel like. And there's a conscious effort to create, a framework to be able to realize that vision. So instead of like, I'm going here and I'm going here and I'm doing all these things and working activities that really don't make a lot of sense and aren't aligned with my vision. So, and again, if we're not thinking about that, we're leading ourselves to overworking. And I just want to say that this is so common. We need to normalize that we don't start off having these skill sets all dialed in, and that most of the time you can scale a business. I did it without having all of my frameworks in place, right? It is possible. So if you are at 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, and you don't have everything dialed in yet, we don't need to shame ourselves. We don't need to guilt ourselves. It's just making sure that we can evaluate where we are and find those gaps, and we're closing the gaps on overworking, right? It's a longer term process.
Yeah, and you can get anywhere in business by working really hard. Like you
Yeah.
absolutely can until you reach that point where you're not able to keep going. And I've shared
Yes.
before with my story, I scaled that first business really quickly.
Yeah.
And I scaled it without systems in place, without team in place, without a
Yes.
lot of my frameworks. I scaled it without a lot of things in place. And did I do it? Yes. Did I almost kill myself and put myself out of business in the process? Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the key. And so I love that you said that, because for those of you who are like, I scaled and help, please, like, we've been there.
We have been there, and it's really common. And I would say that, most of the time when I go into work with clients, there is some, deficit, some area that just really, is a big cause of overworking. And it's fine. And we just, there's absolutely ways. You do such a good job with Lean Out Method on showing people how you can work that out and really creating a business that is sustainable, both sustainable and profitable, right? And you can truly work with ease. There's a fallacy that it has to be hard. That's a myth. We're going to talk more about that in a bit. But it can be completely fun and pleasurable and easy, and also super impactful and super profitable. So that's one area. I would say that that's, area one. So we go in and we, figure out, okay, where are all these places that are creating the gaps and leading you to overwork? Then, and this is where it gets interesting. Notice how I'm like, ooh, setting the stage. Now we have to talk about the background effect, or what I lovingly refer to as the background effect. And these are the subconscious stories that are affecting your everyday life and your everyday work, generally without our awareness. So in the coaching industry, I hear this referred to sometimes as mindset, right? But it's much, much deeper. And we need to examine our underlying beliefs, our attitudes, our behaviors, if we're going to understand why we work the way we work. That was incredibly important to me. It was like, I consider myself a pretty astute individual, and I'm also psychologically minded. And I found myself overworking. It's like, well, how did I get there? So we need to understand for ourselves what's playing on that background track. And again, we have some external factors. Those are things like cultural norms and what I like to refer to as patriarchal programming. These are external values that we've adopted for internal validation, and oftentimes without consideration. It just kind of happens as growing up in our society. So what does that look like? Well, hustling in business has become this badge of honor, right? Oh, I'm like grinding, I'm working, and I'm struggling all the time, and now somehow that makes me worthwhile. Or I think especially for women, we have to hustle to prove our worth instead of working and living from a place of our own inherent value as people. We see a lot of toxic productivity, attaching our self-worth to how much we can produce. I also like to refer to that as performance-based love. There's a fear of rest and pause and slowing down. Oh my gosh, what will happen if I let go? There's a lot of fears around scarcity. So, well, there may not be enough for me, so I have to work more and harder. The whole thought around, bigger is better, more is better, instead of just saying, well, what is enough for me? What feels good to me? What feels full? So, these are all messages that are incredibly damaging myths. It's not real. It's not fact. It's not true. And it's so imperative that we start to have that awareness and question the beliefs. We need to basically restore our own sense of agency and start living from a place that speaks to our true selves and our true values, not, the messaging, this external myth messaging that we're getting from, our cultural norms. And I don't know.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people who listen have worked in corporate in the past.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's just so prevalent, how do you get the best raise? How do you get the best promotions? You work harder than anybody else.
Right.
It's the person who's there before everybody, who leaves after everybody, who works twice as hard. They're the person who gets rewarded and gets promoted and gets the bonuses and gets the things.
Yeah.
And I think for anybody who's ever had a corporate job, or maybe even other types of jobs, but it's very prevalent in the corporate type of culture, you do have that kind of just so deep seated into you. And I spend so much time in corporate when I was working as an employee, but then as I went on to consult in corporate, that it is sometimes I have to kind of fight that a little bit, because it's just, you get so conditioned to it.
Yes, and conditioning is the perfect word. It is conditioning. And yeah, we are conditioned for toxic productivity. Productivity in and of itself, isn't a dirty word. And we certainly can have, productive practices that are, healthy. But it's when we attach it to our self-worth, how much can we produce? That's when it starts to become toxic and damaging to ourselves.
Yeah, agreed. You don't hear me talk about productivity that much, even though most people describe Lean Out Method as a productivity system. But the reason for that is because I'm a big fan of being productive, but only when you know what to be productive on. The
Right.
goal isn't to be productive, it's to figure out the important things to do and then to be as productive as possible when you do them. And that means you're doing the things that are important, and you're not wasting your time or your energy and overworking on things.
Yeah.
And it's just a different perspective, where a lot of people who are productivity experts are more like, manage your calendar and do this and manage your time. And it becomes about the act of the productivity, which is just another way of working harder.
And that is so true. And I absolutely literally remember saying to myself, well, I just need to be more organized so I could do more, when I really actually needed to be doing less. So those are some of the external factors. And then there's also the internal factors. So many of us carry old wounds. things that we experience throughout the course of our lifetime, in our childhood, that are now playing out in our everyday life. So this is where we do see things like limiting beliefs come up, negative thought patterns, big T and little t trauma, adverse childhood experiences, insecure attachment, and people usually end up with, I would say, about 5 common overworking, like psychological patterns. I'll just hit a couple of them. One is the achiever pattern. So stems from I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough. And we're defining our self-worth by what we do and what we achieve in the world, that need to constantly be busy. We talked, and this is some of the external factors as well. But just a sense like I have to do more, or I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. And that shows up, so often. There's also the perfectionist pattern. And I'm looking away right now because I was so incredibly guilty, like this was me, and this is that, fear of failure, which actually has its roots in shame. So it's not okay for me to make mistakes. It needs to be perfect. So, I'm continuously nitpicking and fixing and dialing it in, and making sure that it has to just be right, because if it's not right, then I won't be accepted and I won't be loved, and there's a lot of shame in and around that. So and kind of just feeling like I failed as a person if I don't get it right. A lot of black and white thinking. And then another one that I see pretty commonly is a controller pattern. And that stems from the world is not a safe place, so I have to be in control. So I'm micromanaging. I'm not setting good boundaries. There's not a good set of expectations and then accountability. And I'm overworking because I'm taking responsibility for everything else and everyone else, right? I'm not okay with being vulnerable, and I'm not asking for help and getting my needs met. So there's other patterns, those are 3, I think, pretty common ones that I see coming up. And again, this is all that internal background track that a lot of us don't have awareness about.
Yeah, I like the way you position that as the background track, because I think it's really easy sometimes to see the surface stuff, but
Yeah,
it's not as easy to do the work to kind of dig deep and really figure out what is my background track. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Because every result that you have is a result of actions you take, habits you have in place. It's your current, your current life is a result of all of the things you do all the time. And sometimes
100%.
we don't ever analyze why we do what we do or why we're where we're at.
We
Good or
don't. Yeah, we're 100%. A lot of us are really working kind of on autopilot without a lot of conscious awareness. And it does take compassion with ourselves. I say kind of like gentle excavation of looking at these things, especially when it comes to some of those internal factors, because for a lot of us, it is painful, right? These are patterns that we've had that are born from places like I said, trauma and adverse childhood experiences. So we don't want to re-guilt or re-shame ourselves when looking at these internal factors. It comes up for everybody. And it's really great because there we can reprogram ourselves, build new neural pathways so that we are not working from a place of dysfunction.
I love it. And so that takes me to, how can we actually overcome overworking? Like, how do we avoid burnout and actually build and live our best life?
Yeah, 100%. And I am living proof that is 100% possible, right? It is 100% possible to work with ease. We can build a business that feels sustainable, pleasurable, profitable, abundant. We can know that our business should fit into our lives, not the other way around, and that we can make a big impact, because I know a lot of women who are incredibly high achievers, and they're out to change the world with their businesses, right? I feel that way. I'm out to change the world with this business, and not lose myself in the process. We don't want to sacrifice the things that matters, our health, our joy, and our relationships. So just like we've talked about today, the very first step is always coming into awareness, right? We have to identify why we're overworking. What are those breakdowns in our business? what's going on in the background track. So that would be the very first step. And then two, and this is central to my work, which is taking a holistic approach to work-life balance, right? My framework, the YBBL framework, identifies 4 pillars that create harmony between your business and personal life. They're, I guess, guideposts for ensuring that you're fueling yourself to become your best self and doing your best work. So 1, we want to run a profitable, sustainable business. I mean, I just repeat those words over and over again, especially the sustainability part. And a business that fuels you instead of drains you. Number 2, it is so incredibly important that you're prioritizing time for your self-care and your hobbies without feeling guilty, right? That self-care piece is the piece where we take our nervous system, which is generally in a state in this day and age of fight or flight, and we are activating the parasympathetic nervous system and in a place of rest and digest. Because if we're in flight all the time, we will end up ill, right? Our bodies are not designed to be that way. We have to take breaks. It's imperative. Another pillar is joy. We're here because life is supposed to be fun, right? And we need to, like I say, unapologetically invest in our happiness. We have to prioritize the experiences that light us up. It's so, so incredibly important. And again, that's also part of, a nervous system that's in not in a state of chronic dysfunction. And then the last pillar is connection, and that's having ample time to connect with your friends, your family, the people that light you up and fill you up, and receiving the support that you need to thrive while doing your work that betters our world, right? And then lastly, we just need to practice. We just need to practice prioritizing, working the pillars, prioritizing ourselves. I say this over and over, which is your best self does your best work. How you show up for your business affects everything from productivity to profit to impact. And if we truly want to serve well, right? If we truly are interested in creating change in this world, then we need to know that it starts right here with us. We have to fill our cups first, and we have to make, our wellness, our joy, and our connections a priority. So, 3 simple steps.
I love it. And so if people want to learn more about your best business life and about you, tell us what you've got going on and where they can find you.
Yes, they can find me at yourbestbusinesslife.com. And it would be great. And we were talking today about, kind of some of those external, internal factors. I have a business health assessment, which is really fun. It's very short, and it focuses on those 5 key areas of your business. So if you have a better understanding of your current strengths, and then you can also look at your weaknesses and places that might be leaving you vulnerable to overworking and overwhelm. So that's a great tool, and they can just go out to my website on the Start Here page and take the assessment.
I love it, guys. Take that assessment for sure. It's rather brilliant. I absolutely love what you created. So I have one final question for you, and we've talked about this once before, so I'm super curious to hear what your answer is going to be this time. But it's, how do you work smarter, not harder, and keep things lean in your business?
I would say, and again, repeating myself, which it's just really simple. Your best self does your best work. And just remembering that how you show up on that daily basis affects everything. Productivity, profit, impact. So, keeping that in mind, and it's a really great way to keep yourself, working smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. Well, Jordan, this has been such a great conversation. I always love having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. And guys, go out and listen to episode 19, where you'll hear a little bit more about Jordan's story. You'll hear a little bit more about burnout. It's a really great discussion. So be sure to check that out, and you'll find the link to that as well as where you can find Jordan down in the show notes. So thank you guys so much. We will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.